The wrench slipped from Marcus Chen's oil-stained fingers as the Mercedes limousine pulled to a stuttering halt on the shoulder of Highway 101, its front tire deflated like a punctured dream. Steam rose from the asphalt in the late afternoon heat, creating shimmering mirages that danced between the broken yellow lines and the endless California desert beyond. Marcus had been walking the same stretch of road for 47 minutes, his backpack heavy with textbooks he'd bought used and highlighted until the pages looked like abstract art, when the sleek black vehicle appeared through the heat waves like something from another world. The emergency flashers blinked in a hypnotic rhythm. Click, pause, click, pause, as Marcus approached the stranded luxury car. Through the tinted windows, he could make out the silhouette of a figure in the back seat, motionless as a statue. The driver's door opened with a soft pneumatic hiss, and a man in his 60s emerged, his crisp uniform wilting in the desert heat. Sweat beaded on his dark skin as he surveyed the damaged tire with the resigned expression of someone who had seen this particular disaster before. "Engine trouble?" Marcus called out, adjusting the strap of his backpack. His voice carried across the empty highway, swallowed almost immediately by the vast silence of the Mojave. The driver looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten that other humans existed beyond the climate-controlled bubble of the limousine. "Tire blowout," the driver replied, his voice carrying a slight Caribbean accent. "TAA says 90 minutes minimum response time out here." He gestured toward the endless expanse of scrub brush and distant mountains. "Mr. Wellington has a conference call with Tokyo in 30 minutes that could determine the fate of 3,000 jobs." Marcus set down his backpack on the gravel shoulder, the sound unnaturally loud in the desert quiet. "I might be able to help," he said, unzipping the main compartment. Inside, nestled between his differential equations textbook and a thermos that had seen better days, was a compact emergency kit his grandfather had assembled years ago. The old man's voice echoed in Marcus's memory. "Every Chen man knows how to fix what's broken, son. That's how we survive." The toolkit had belonged to his grandfather, Chen, and the worn leather case told the story of decades helping others on the road. "You sure about this, son?" the driver asked, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. His name tag read Roosevelt, and his eyes held the kind of patience that came from years of navigating the unpredictable demands of wealth. "This isn't exactly a standard sedan we're dealing with here." Marcus examined the tire, running his fingers along the sidewall where a piece of twisted metal had torn through the rubber like a knife through silk. The damage was clean but significant. Too much for a simple patch, but not beyond the scope of emergency repair. "I can get you mobile," he said, pulling out his grandfather's jack. "Won't be pretty, and you'll want to replace it properly as soon as you can, but it'll hold long enough to get you where you need to go." The rear window of the limousine descended with a whisper-quiet hum, and Marcus caught his first glimpse of the passenger. Wellington was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps in his early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the intense focus that suggested his mind was always processing multiple streams of information simultaneously. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's tuition for the entire semester, but his tie was loosened and his sleeves were rolled up, small concessions to the desert heat. "How long?" Wellington asked, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to having his questions answered immediately and accurately. Roosevelt helped guide the jack into position, his movements practiced and efficient. "Been Mr. Wellington's driver for 12 years, he said quietly as Marcus began working the jack handle. "Never seen him miss an important call. This Tokyo deal, it's been 2 years in the making." The jack lifted smoothly, raising the corner of the limousine with mechanical precision. Marcus's grandfather had taught him that every tool had its own personality, its own way of being coaxed into cooperation. The secret wasn't force. It was understanding, patience, and respect for the machine's limitations. As the wheel came free, Marcus noticed something odd. The spare tire, when Roosevelt opened the trunk, wasn't a temporary emergency spare he'd expected. Instead, it was a full-sized replacement, perfectly matched to the other 3 wheels. The trunk itself was a marvel of organization. Emergency supplies, first aid kit, emergency cash, even a change of clothes in Wellington's exact size. This was the vehicle of someone who left nothing to chance, who planned for every contingency except the one that had just occurred. "Your boss always this prepared?" Marcus asked, wrestling the replacement tire into position. Roosevelt smiled for the first time since the breakdown. "Mr. Wellington doesn't believe in luck. He believes in preparation. Says luck is just preparation meeting opportunity." The older man paused, watching Marcus thread the lug nuts back into place with practiced efficiency. "Though I guess today he's getting a little of both." The tire seated properly on the first try, and Marcus began tightening the nuts in the star pattern his grandfather had taught him. Never fully tighten one before setting the others. Always maintain balance. Always think 3 steps ahead. The desert wind had picked up, carrying the scent of sage and creosote bush across the highway, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled lazily above the thermals rising from the sun-baked earth. "Where'd you learn to do this?" Roosevelt asked, genuinely curious. "My grandfather," Marcus replied, checking the tire pressure with the ancient gauge. "Perfect. He used to say that knowing how to fix things was the difference between being helpless and being helpful. Said it didn't matter how smart you were if you couldn't solve the problems right in front of you." The rear window descended again, and Wellington emerged from the car completely this time, straightening his jacket despite the heat. Up close, Marcus could see the man's eyes, sharp, calculating, but not unkind. They were the eyes of someone who had seen both triumph and failure, who understood that success was measured not just in dollars, but in the ability to navigate unexpected challenges. "Finished?" Wellington asked, walking around to examine Marcus's work. "All set," Marcus replied, lowering the jack and stowing his grandfather's tools back in their worn leather case. "Should get you where you need to go, but have it checked by a professional as soon as possible. That metal that caused the blowout looked like it came from a construction site. Probably more debris further up the road." Wellington pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Johnson? Yes, we're mobile again. No, not AAA. A Good Samaritan." He paused, listening. 15 minutes. We can make it." He ended the call and turned back to Marcus. "How much do you owe me?" Marcus was already shouldering his backpack, eager to resume his trek home. The sun was getting lower, and he had 3 more miles to cover before dark. "Nothing," he said. "Just glad I could help." "Nothing?" Wellington's eyebrows rose slightly. "Son, that call you just saved is worth more than most people make in a year. There has to be something." Marcus paused at the edge of the highway, where the asphalt met the gravel's shoulder. "My grandfather always said that helping people wasn't a business transaction. It was just what you do." He shifted his backpack, settling the weight more comfortably across his shoulders. "Someday, I might be the one broken down on the side of the road." Wellington studied Marcus for a long moment, his gaze taking in the worn backpack, the second-hand clothes, and the calloused hands that spoke of someone who worked with his hands as well as his mind. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Chen." "Well, Marcus Chen, you've done me a considerable service today." Wellington reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, but instead of handing it over, he hesitated. "What do you do? Work, I mean." "I'm a student," Marcus replied. "Engineering at Cal Poly, mechanical, with a focus on renewable energy systems." He didn't mention his financial struggles or why he was walking instead of driving. Wellington nodded slowly, as if processing this information through some internal algorithm. "And after graduation?" "Hopefully designing better wind turbine systems, maybe working on grid integration for renewable sources." He glanced at the sun, which was noticeably lower than it had been when he'd stopped. "Look, I really should get going. It's a long walk and—" "Roosevelt?" Wellington called to his driver, who was already settling back into the driver's seat. "Give Mr. Chen a ride wherever he needs to go." "That's really not necessary. I don't mind walking." "I insist," Wellington said, and there was something in his tone that suggested this wasn't really a request. It's the least we can do. The limousine's interior was like stepping into a different universe. Creating these detailed stories requires significant time and research effort. If you're finding this story engaging, please take a moment to like and share it with others who might enjoy it. The leather seats were butter soft. The air conditioning was perfectly calibrated. The silence was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Wellington settled across from him, and for a moment, the only sound was the whisper-quiet hum of the engine as Roosevelt guided them back onto the highway. "Tell me about your grandfather," Wellington said suddenly. Marcus was surprised by the personal nature of the question. In his experience, wealthy people, not that he'd known many, tended to maintain a careful distance from those they perceived as beneath their social stratum. He came here from Taiwan in 1967, spoke maybe 50 words of English, had a wife and a baby son, my father, and about $20 in his pocket. Wellington nodded, his attention completely focused on Marcus's words. He started with a small import business, bringing in tools and small electronics. Nothing fancy, but good quality. He always said that reputation was the only currency that really mattered, that you could lose money and make it back, but if you lost people's trust, you had nothing. Marcus paused, looking out the window at the desert landscape streaming past. He worked 16-hour days for 20 years, saved every penny he could, sent my dad to college, and then helped put me through high school when my parents couldn't manage it alone. What happened to him? Heart attack, 3 years ago, right there in his workshop, surrounded by the tools he'd collected over 40 years in America. Marcus's voice caught slightly. I inherited his toolkit, but more than that, I inherited his philosophy. Work hard, be honest, help when you can, and never forget where you came from. Wellington was quiet for a long moment, staring out his own window at the passing landscape. When he finally spoke, his voice had a different quality, softer, more reflective. My grandfather started with nothing too. Irish immigrant, 1923. Different circumstances, same story in many ways. Built a small construction company from the ground up, one job at a time. The limousine slowed, and Marcus realized they were approaching the off-ramp that led to his neighborhood. Roosevelt navigated the surface streets with the same smooth precision he'd shown on the highway, passing strip malls and apartment complexes that had seen better days. Marcus felt suddenly self-conscious about the contrast between Wellington's world and his own. "This is fine," Marcus said, as they approached his street. "Really, anywhere here is perfect." But Wellington was looking out the window with genuine interest, not judgment. "This is your neighborhood?"
"Born and raised," Marcus confirmed. "It's not much, but it's home." The car pulled up in front of Marcus's apartment building, a two-story complex that had been built in the 1970s and showed every year of its age. The stucco was cracked in places, the landscaping was minimal, and several of the mailboxes hung at odd angles. But the small front yards were well-maintained, children's bikes were scattered on the sidewalks, and the sound of laughter drifted from an open window somewhere above. "Thank you," Marcus said, reaching for the door handle. "For the ride, I mean. And good luck with your call." "Marcus," Wellington said, and something in his tone made Marcus pause. "That business card I was going to give you earlier, I held on to it because I wanted to ask you something first." Marcus waited, his hand still on the door handle. "What would you do if money wasn't an obstacle? If you could pursue any dream, solve any problem, make any difference you wanted to make?" The question caught Marcus off guard. It wasn't something he'd allowed himself to think about in concrete terms. His life was too focused on immediate survival to indulge in abstract dreams. But the answer came to him immediately, as if it had been waiting just below the surface of his consciousness. "I'd want to democratize renewable energy, make it so affordable and accessible that even places like this," he gestured toward his neighborhood, "could go completely off-grid if they wanted to. Create systems that were so elegant and efficient that clean energy became the obvious choice, not just the idealistic one." Wellington nodded slowly, as if Marcus had just confirmed something he'd suspected. "That's Exactly what I thought you'd say. He handed over the business card Marcus had declined earlier. Don't look at it now. Wait until you're inside. And Marcus. Yes, sir? What you did today, stopping to help a stranger, refusing payment, giving freely of your time and skill, that's rarer than you might think. Hold on to that. Marcus climbed the narrow stairs to his second-floor apartment, Wellington's business card still clutched in his hand, unexamined. The familiar sounds of his building surrounded him. Mrs. Rodriguez's television playing her nightly telenovela, the Thompsons' baby crying softly through thin walls, and the steady thrum of air conditioning units working overtime against the desert heat. These were the sounds of his world, comforting in their predictability, honest in their ordinariness. In the bedroom, a mattress on a simple frame shared space with a dresser that held his entire wardrobe: 4 pairs of jeans, 6 t-shirts, 2 button-down shirts for job interviews, and 1 suit he'd bought at a thrift store for formal occasions that rarely came. He set his backpack on the desk and pulled out his homework: problem sets in thermodynamics and fluid mechanics that would occupy the next 4 hours of his evening. But first, he allowed himself to look at Wellington's business card. The cardstock was thick, expensive, with a subtle embossed texture that caught the light from his desk lamp. It read, Harrison Wellington III, Chairman and CEO, Wellington Industries. Below that, a phone number with a 212 area code and an address on 5th Avenue in Manhattan. Marcus turned the card over and found a handwritten note in precise script. Call me Monday morning. We need to talk. H.W.
Marcus set the card aside and tried to focus on his homework, but his mind kept drifting back to the strange encounter on the highway. There had been something about Wellington's final questions, the intensity of his attention when Marcus talked about his dreams, that suggested more than casual conversation. But Marcus had learned not to build castles in the air. Hope was a luxury he couldn't afford to indulge too freely. His phone buzzed. A text from his friend Jamie, his study partner in their renewable energy systems class. Study group tomorrow night? Chen's place? Marcus smiled despite himself. His apartment had become the unofficial headquarters for their study group, not because it was comfortable, his friends' places were all larger and better furnished, but because Marcus was the one who could explain complex engineering concepts in ways that made sense. Teaching helped him learn, and his friends' questions often illuminated aspects of problems he might have missed on his own. At 11:30, Marcus finally closed his thermodynamics textbook and rubbed his tired eyes. He'd finished 2 problem sets and started reviewing for next week's fluid mechanics exam. Tomorrow would bring his usual routine: classes from 8 to 3, 4 hours at his job tutoring underclassmen in the math lab, then evening shift at the campus coffee shop until closing. Thursday meant laundry at the laundromat because his building's machines had been broken for 6 weeks, grocery shopping with coupons he'd carefully clipped from the Sunday paper, and more homework until his eyes burned with fatigue. But tonight, as he prepared for bed, Marcus found himself thinking about his grandfather's workshop. Chen had kept it in the garage of his small house, a space that had evolved over decades into a temple of practical wisdom. Every tool had its place, every project had its purpose, and every lesson was earned through experience rather than theory. Marcus remembered Saturday mornings spent in that workshop, watching his grandfather's patient hands coax broken appliances back to life, listening to stories about the early days in America when every dollar had to be stretched until it screamed. The difference between a poor man and a rich man, Lee had once said while rebuilding a carburetor that 3 mechanics had declared hopeless, isn't money, Marcus. It's whether he believes he can fix what's broken or whether he believes he needs someone else to fix it for him. Marcus was 12 then, more interested in video games than life philosophy, but the words had lodged themselves in his memory like seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow. Now, at 22, he understood what his grandfather had meant. Poverty wasn't just about lacking money. It was about lacking options, lacking the confidence to believe that problems had solutions, lacking the tools and knowledge to implement those solutions when you found them.
His phone alarm went off at 6 a.m. sharp, cutting through a dream about limousines and business cards and conversations in languages he didn't speak. Marcus rolled out of bed, pulled on running clothes, and headed out into the pre-dawn darkness for his daily 5-mile run. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour, streetlights creating pools of yellow illumination in the gray morning air, and Marcus's footsteps echoed off sleeping houses and empty storefronts. Running wasn't just exercise, it was meditation, planning, and problem-solving all rolled into one rhythmic activity. This morning, his mind churned through the previous day's encounter, trying to process what it might mean, if anything. He'd helped a stranded motorist, accepted a ride home, and received a business card with a cryptic note. In the clear light of dawn, it seemed almost anticlimactic, the kind of chance encounter that would make a good story someday, but probably wouldn't change anything substantial about his life. By the time he returned to his apartment, showered, and grabbed his usual breakfast, oatmeal with honey and whatever fruit was on sale at the grocery store, Marcus had mentally filed the Wellington encounter under interesting but irrelevant, and was focused on the day ahead. His first class was heat transfer, where Professor Martinez would be covering convective cooling systems, a topic directly relevant to the wind turbine efficiency project Marcus was working on for his senior thesis. The campus was coming alive as Marcus walked to his first class, backpack loaded with books and the remnants of yesterday's packed lunch. Students hurried past in small groups, their conversations a mixture of academic stress and social planning, and Marcus felt the familiar pang of being simultaneously part of this community and separate from it. He knew many of his classmates by name, worked with them on group projects, even socialized with them occasionally. But there was always an invisible barrier created by circumstances. When they talked about spring break trips to Cabo or summer internships in Silicon Valley, Marcus nodded politely and said nothing about his spring break spent working double shifts to catch up on rent.
Heat transfer class went well. Professor Martinez's explanation of boundary layer theory clicked with something Marcus had been struggling to understand in his turbine design, and he found himself taking notes with renewed energy. After class, he caught up with Sarah Kim, a classmate who was working on a similar senior project focused on solar panel efficiency. "Any chance you want to grab lunch and compare notes?" Sarah asked as they walked out of the engineering building together. "I'm stuck on some thermal calculations that are making my brain hurt." Marcus checked his watch. He had 45 minutes before his shift at the math lab. "Coffee shop in the student union? I can look at your calculations if you don't mind me eating the sandwich I brought instead of buying lunch." Sarah laughed. "Deal! Your grandfather's tools fix mechanical problems, your brain fixes mathematical ones." They found a table in the noisy student union, and Marcus pulled out his thermos and sandwich while Sarah spread her calculations across the table. Her solar panel project was elegant, a tracking system that would automatically adjust panel orientation to maximize energy capture throughout the day. The math involved complex calculations of solar angles, atmospheric interference, and mechanical efficiency, but Marcus could see where she'd made a small error in her thermal expansion calculations. "Here," he said, pulling out his calculator and a pencil. "You're accounting for expansion in the tracking motor, but you're not considering the differential expansion between the aluminum frame and the silicon panels themselves. Small difference, but it compounds over a full day of operation." Sarah studied his corrections, her eyes lighting up as she saw the solution. "That's brilliant," she said. "I've been chasing this error for 3 days. How do you see these things so clearly?" Marcus shrugged, finishing his sandwich. "My grandfather always said that problems talk to you if you know how to listen. Most of the time, the solution is simpler than you think. You're just looking in the wrong place." "Your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Marcus agreed, then glanced at his watch. "I hate to run, but I've got to get to the math lab." The tutoring session at the math lab that afternoon was particularly challenging. Marcus worked with 3 different students, a freshman struggling with basic calculus, a sophomore who couldn't grasp differential equations, and a junior whose understanding of linear algebra had somehow gotten completely scrambled. Each required a different approach, a different way of explaining concepts that Marcus understood intuitively but had to break down into digestible pieces. "I just don't get it," said Kevin, the freshman, staring at his calculus homework with the expression of someone who'd been told to explain quantum physics using only crayon drawings. How is the derivative of x squared equal to 2x? Where does the 2 come from? Marcus pulled out a piece of scratch paper and drew a simple curve. Think of it this way, he said. You're driving a car, and this curve represents your position over time. The derivative isn't asking where you are, it's asking how fast you're going at any specific moment. He spent 20 minutes with Kevin, drawing graphs and creating analogies until the concept clicked. When Kevin finally solved a problem on his own, his face lit up with the particular joy that came from understanding something that had previously seemed impossible. "You should be a teacher," Kevin said as he packed up his books. "You explain things better than Professor Johnson does." Marcus had heard variations of this comment dozens of times, and it always left him with mixed feelings. Teaching came naturally to him, and he genuinely enjoyed helping other students understand difficult concepts. But teaching required advanced degrees, and advanced degrees required money he didn't have and time he couldn't spare. Another dream filed under "someday, maybe, if circumstances change." His evening shift at the campus coffee shop was busy. The pre-final stress was driving students to consume caffeine at unprecedented rates, and Marcus found himself in constant motion behind the espresso machine, taking orders, making drinks, and cleaning equipment in the brief lulls between rushes. His coworker, Jenna, was a communications major who treated the job as a social opportunity, chatting with regular customers about weekend plans and upcoming parties. "You're quiet tonight," Jenna observed during a rare quiet moment around 9 p.m. "Everything okay?" Marcus was wiping down the espresso machine for the third time that hour, his mind only half focused on the task. "Just thinking," he said. "About what? That thermodynamics exam next week?" "Something that happened yesterday," Marcus said, then found himself telling Jenna about the encounter with Wellington. He kept the details simple, focusing on the mechanical aspects of fixing the tire rather than the more personal elements of their conversation, but Jenna listened with the rapt attention of someone who consumed celebrity gossip and romance novels with equal enthusiasm. "Wait," she said when Marcus finished. "Harrison Wellington? Like Wellington Industries Wellington?" Marcus blinked. "You know who he is?" "Marcus, everyone knows who Harrison Wellington is. He's like one of the richest people in America. Wellington Industries owns half the wind farms in the country, plus solar installations, hydroelectric plants. They're basically the renewable energy company." Jenna's eyes were wide with excitement. "And he gave you his business card with a note?" Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a flutter of possibility that he immediately tried to suppress. It was probably just politeness. Rich people probably have standard ways of saying thank you. "Or," Jenna said, her voice rising with excitement, "maybe he's going to offer you a job. Maybe he was so impressed with your mechanical skills and your attitude that he wants to hire you right out of college." "That kind of thing doesn't happen to people like me," Marcus said automatically. But even as he spoke the words, he could feel uncertainty creeping in around their edges. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of caffeine and speculation, Jenna periodically bringing up new theories about Wellington's intentions while Marcus tried to focus on work and not let hope take root too deeply in his imagination. By the time they closed at 11 p.m., Marcus's mind was churning with questions and possibilities he'd been trying all day to ignore. He walked home through streets that were quieter now, most of his neighbors already settled in for the night. His apartment felt smaller when he returned, the walls seeming to press in with all the limitations and constraints of his current life. He pulled out Wellington's business card again, studying the elegant typography and the handwritten note that could mean everything or nothing. His laptop sat open on his desk, and on impulse, Marcus pulled up a search engine and typed Harrison Wellington III. The results were extensive. News articles about renewable energy projects, interviews about sustainable development, photos from charity galas and industry conferences. Jenna was right. Wellington wasn't just wealthy, he was influential, a major player in exactly the field Marcus dreamed of entering. One article from Forbes caught his attention. The Unlikely Environmentalist: How Harrison Wellington Built an Empire on Wind and Water. The piece described Wellington's transformation of his grandfather's construction company into one of America's largest renewable energy corporations, with projects spanning from offshore wind farms to massive solar installations in the desert Southwest.
Marcus read until his eyes burned, absorbing details about Wellington's philosophy, his company's culture, his reputation for identifying and developing young talent. By the time he closed the laptop, it was nearly 2 a.m., and his alarm would go off in 4 hours. As he finally fell asleep, Marcus found himself thinking not about the business card or the possibilities it might represent, but about his grandfather's workshop and the patient way Chen had approached every problem, methodically, practically, without allowing hope or fear to cloud his judgment. Tomorrow was Thursday, which meant classes, laundry, and homework. If Wellington's note meant something significant, Marcus would find out Monday morning. Until then, there was no point in letting speculation distract him from the work at hand. But as sleep finally claimed him, Marcus's last conscious thought was about wind turbines spinning in endless desert spaces, and the possibility that sometimes, just sometimes, helping a stranger on the side of the road could change everything. Thursday morning arrived with the jarring insistence of Marcus's alarm clock, cutting through dreams of business meetings and renewable energy projects that dissolved like morning mist as consciousness returned. He followed his usual routine: 5-mile run, shower, oatmeal with honey, but found his mind wandering repeatedly to the business card that sat on his desk like a small, elegant question mark. His advanced fluid mechanics class provided welcome distraction. Professor Chen, no relation, though Marcus always felt a brief moment of kinship when he heard the name, was covering turbulence modeling, a topic directly relevant to wind turbine blade design. Marcus took detailed notes, his engineering mind fully engaged with the mathematical elegance of describing chaotic fluid flows through precise equations. The key insight, Professor Chen explained, drawing complex diagrams on the whiteboard, is that what appears random actually follows deeper patterns. Turbulence isn't the absence of order, it's order at a scale too complex for simple analysis. After class, Marcus gathered his notes and headed toward the door, but Professor Chen called out to him. "Mr. Chen, could I speak with you for a moment?" Marcus approached the professor's desk, wondering if he'd missed an assignment or made an error in his recent homework. Professor Chen was organizing his papers with the methodical precision of someone who dealt with chaos theory for a living, but his expression was thoughtful rather than concerned. "I've been reviewing your work this semester, particularly your senior thesis proposal on wind turbine efficiency optimization. It's sophisticated work, Marcus, graduate-level sophisticated." Marcus felt a flutter of pride mixed with uncertainty. "Thank you, Professor. I've been putting a lot of time into it." "Have you given any thought to graduate school? Your academic record and research approach make you an ideal PhD candidate. We look for in PhD candidates." The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Graduate school was one of those distant dreams he'd trained himself not to think about too concretely, like vacation homes or early retirement. Honestly, I haven't thought much about it. The financial aspects are pretty daunting." Professor Chen nodded with the understanding of someone who'd navigated similar challenges. "I'm originally from Taiwan myself, came here for graduate school with almost no money and barely functional English. I understand the constraints you're working under." He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer and handed it to Marcus. "Research assistantship opportunities. Full tuition waiver plus a living stipend, not luxurious but sufficient. Several of these programs would be perfect for your research interests, and I'd be happy to write letters of recommendation."
Marcus accepted the folder with hands that trembled slightly. Inside were program descriptions from universities across the country: Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, institutions that had always seemed as distant and unattainable as space stations. "Professor, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet. Take the folder home, read through the materials, think about what you want. But Marcus? Professor Chen's voice took on a different quality, more personal than academic. Don't let financial constraints make your decisions for you. There are always solutions if you're willing to work for them. Marcus left the engineering building in a daze, the folder clutched against his chest like a life preserver. The timing felt surreal. First Wellington's business card, now graduate school opportunities. After years of carefully managed expectations and modest dreams, the universe seemed to be presenting him with possibilities he'd never allowed himself to seriously consider. His shift at the math lab was particularly busy that afternoon. Word had spread somehow that Marcus was especially good at explaining complex concepts, and students were beginning to seek him out specifically. He worked with 6 different students over his 4-hour shift, covering everything from basic algebra to advanced differential equations. Each session required him to find new ways of explaining familiar concepts, new metaphors and analogies that would make abstract mathematics concrete and understandable. "I wish you were teaching my calculus class instead of Professor Williams," said Amy, a sophomore who'd been struggling with integration techniques. "You make it seem like it actually makes sense." "It does make sense," Marcus replied, sketching another diagram to illustrate the relationship between differentiation and integration. "Mathematics isn't arbitrary. It's a language for describing patterns in the world. Once you see the patterns, the rules follow naturally." By the end of his shift, Marcus felt mentally exhausted but oddly energized. There was something deeply satisfying about helping other students understand difficult concepts, about being the bridge between confusion and comprehension. Professor Chen's words about graduate school echoed in his mind as he walked across campus toward the coffee shop. The evening shift at the coffee shop started quietly, but by 7 p.m., the place was packed with students cramming for midterms and faculty members grading papers with the grim determination of people facing an insurmountable task. Marcus fell into his usual rhythm, taking orders, making drinks, maintaining equipment, but his mind kept drifting to the folder of graduate school information sitting on his desk at home. "Earth to Marcus," Jenna said, bumping his shoulder as they passed each other behind the counter. "You've been making that latte for 5 minutes. Pretty sure the customer wants to drink it sometime this century." Marcus looked down and realized he'd been mechanically steaming milk while his mind wandered through research possibilities and academic opportunities. He quickly finished the drink and handed it to the waiting customer, a physics professor who looked at him with mild concern. "Everything okay, son? You seem distracted tonight." "Just thinking about some decisions I need to make." "Ah, the curse of being young and smart. Too many possibilities, not enough certainty about which path to choose." The comment stayed with Marcus for the rest of his shift. By the time they closed at 11 p.m., he'd decided that Thursday night would be devoted to serious consideration of his options. He walked home through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, past the taco trucks and laundromats and small businesses that formed the infrastructure of working-class life, and felt a strange sense of standing at crossroads he hadn't realized he was approaching. His apartment felt different when he returned, charged with possibility in a way that made the familiar walls seem less confining and more like the launching pad they might become. Marcus spread the graduate school materials across his desk next to Wellington's business card, creating an odd tableau of competing futures. The contrast was stark. The university brochures spoke of years of research and academic achievement, while the business card promised immediate entry into the professional world he'd been dreaming about. He made himself a cup of tea using the electric kettle his mother had given him for his birthday, one of the few luxuries in his Spartan apartment, and settled down to read through the research assistantship information. The stipends were modest but sufficient. The research opportunities were exactly aligned with his interests, and several programs offered the kind of interdisciplinary approach that matched his practical, hands-on learning style. As he read, Marcus found himself thinking about his conversation with Sarah Kim earlier that day. Her solar panel project was the kind of work he could see himself pursuing at the graduate level, practical applications of theoretical knowledge, real-world solutions to pressing environmental problems. The thought of spending 4 or 5 years diving deep into renewable energy research, working alongside professors who were pioneers in the field, felt both thrilling and terrifying. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "How are classes going? Dad says to remind you about Sunday dinner." Marcus smiled, despite the swirl of uncertainty in his mind. Sunday dinners with his parents remained a weekly constant, providing both comfort and perspective. The thought of his parents made Marcus consider how they might react to news of graduate school opportunities. His father had sacrificed his own educational dreams to support his family when Marcus was young, taking a job at a manufacturing plant that provided steady income but little satisfaction. His mother worked part-time at a medical clinic, handling insurance paperwork with the patience of someone who understood that bureaucracy was often the biggest obstacle between people and the help they needed. Both parents had made it clear that Marcus's education was their highest priority, but Marcus also knew they worried about the debt he was accumulating and the uncertainty of his future prospects. Graduate school would mean more years of financial dependence, more years of uncertainty, but it would also mean better long-term opportunities and the chance to pursue research that could make a real difference. Marcus was still reading through program descriptions when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Hello." "Marcus? This is Sarah Kim. I hope I'm not calling too late." Marcus glanced at his clock. 11:47 p.m. "No, I'm still up. What's going on?" "I just got off the phone with Professor Martinez. Marcus, he wants to recommend both of us for a summer research internship at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado. Full-time positions, real research projects, actual stipends." Sarah's voice was bubbling with excitement. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity we've been hoping for." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. NREL was one of the premier renewable energy research institutions in the country, the kind of place where groundbreaking work happened every day. "Tell me everything," he said. 2 positions, 10 weeks, working on different aspects of wind farm optimization. One focused on blade design and aerodynamics. That would be perfect for your turbine efficiency work. The other focused on grid integration and energy storage, more my area. Professor Martinez thinks we're both strong candidates, but we need to submit applications by next Friday. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this new information. The internship would be an incredible experience, the kind of credential that would strengthen any graduate school application or job search. But it would also mean giving up my summer job plans, which I'd been counting on to save money for my final year of college. "Marcus, you still there?" "Yeah, sorry. Just thinking." "This sounds amazing, Sarah. What kind of stipend are we talking about?" "Enough to cover living expenses and then some. Not get-rich money, but definitely livable." She paused. "Are you interested? Because Professor Martinez wants to submit both our names together as a team recommendation." "Absolutely interested," Marcus said, and as he spoke the words, he realized they were completely true. The financial calculations could be worked out later. This was the kind of opportunity that didn't come along often, and passing it up would be foolish. "Email me the application details?" "Already sent. Check your email in about 30 seconds. Marcus opened his laptop and refreshed his email, finding Sarah's message with several attachments. The application was extensive. Transcripts, letters of recommendation, a research proposal, and a personal statement explaining why the applicant was interested in renewable energy research. "This is going to be a lot of work," Marcus said, scrolling through the requirements. "The best opportunities always are," Sarah replied. "But Marcus, if we get these positions, it changes everything. NREL internships are like golden tickets in the renewable energy world.
People who do summer research there get recruited by every major company in the field. After Sarah hung up, Marcus sat staring at his laptop screen, surrounded by graduate school brochures, with Wellington's business card still visible at the edge of his peripheral vision. 3 different paths were spreading out before him, each representing a different version of his future. He could pursue graduate school and become a researcher, developing new technologies and teaching the next generation of engineers. He could apply for the NREL internship and gain the kind of experience that would make him attractive to major corporations. Or he could call Wellington on Monday morning and see what opportunities might emerge from that unexpected encounter. Marcus realized the opportunities might complement rather than compete with each other. For the first time in years, Marcus found himself thinking not about limitations and constraints, but about possibilities and potential. The change in perspective was dizzying, like stepping out of a small, familiar room into a vast landscape full of paths leading in directions he'd never imagined. He spent the next 2 hours working on the NREL application, crafting a research proposal that built on his senior thesis work, but expanded it to address larger questions about wind farm efficiency and grid integration. The writing came easily, flowing from years of accumulated knowledge and genuine passion for the subject matter. By the time he finally closed his laptop and prepared for bed, he had completed the first draft of his personal statement and outlined his research proposal. Friday morning brought a text from Jamie asking about the weekend study group, and Marcus realized he'd been so focused on new opportunities that he'd almost forgotten about his immediate academic responsibilities. He had a thermodynamics exam on Monday, a fluid mechanics problem set due Wednesday, and a lab report that needed to be finished over the weekend. The steady rhythm of undergraduate life continued, but now it felt like preparation for something larger rather than an end in itself. His morning classes went well. Materials science with Professor Rodriguez, who was covering stress-strain relationships in composite materials, and environmental engineering with Professor Washington, who was discussing life cycle analysis for renewable energy systems. Marcus found himself taking notes with renewed energy, seeing connections between classroom concepts and real-world applications more clearly than ever before. During lunch, he met up with his study group in the engineering building's common area. Jamie, Alex, and Chen, a coincidence of names that never failed to amuse Marcus, had spread their books across a large table and were deep in discussion about thermodynamic cycles. "Marcus," Jamie called out as he approached. "Perfect timing! We're arguing about the efficiency calculations for this Rankine cycle problem, and Alex thinks he's figured out something that the textbook got wrong." I looked at Alex's work, following the calculations step by step. "Your math is right, but you're making an assumption about isentropic compression that doesn't hold for real-world applications. The textbook is accounting for mechanical inefficiencies that you're leaving out." "See?" Chen said, grinning at Alex. "Marcus always catches the stuff we miss." They worked through several problem sets together, with Marcus helping to clarify concepts and correct calculation errors. There was something comforting about this familiar routine, the collaborative process of working through challenging problems with friends who shared his passion for engineering. But underneath the familiar comfort, Marcus felt a new sense of urgency, as if these study sessions were preparation for challenges more significant than classroom exams. "Hey," Jamie said as they were packing up their books, "are you okay? You seem different today. More focused, but also more, excited." Marcus considered how to answer. His friends knew about his financial constraints and his general plans after graduation, but he hadn't shared the details of his encounter with Wellington or the graduate school opportunities Professor Chen had mentioned. The NREL internship possibility felt too new and uncertain to discuss yet. "Just thinking about the future," Marcus said finally, "realizing that maybe I have more options than I thought I did." "That's good," Alex said.
You're too smart to be limiting yourself. Whatever you end up doing after graduation, you're going to be successful. The casual confidence in Alex's voice surprised Marcus. He'd become so accustomed to thinking about his constraints and limitations that he'd forgotten how his academic performance and problem-solving abilities appeared to others. His classmates saw him as someone who would naturally succeed. It was Marcus himself who had the most doubt about his future prospects. His afternoon shift at the math lab was particularly rewarding. He worked with a graduate student who was struggling with partial differential equations for her thesis research, and together they worked through several complex problems that had been blocking her progress for weeks. The session reinforced Marcus's growing sense that teaching and research might be a natural combination for him. He enjoyed the problem-solving aspects of both activities, and each seemed to enhance his abilities in the other. "You should seriously consider becoming a professor," the graduate student said as they finished their session. "You have a gift for making complex concepts accessible. That's rarer than you might think." The evening shift at the coffee shop was busy again, but Marcus found himself working with renewed energy and focus. Even the repetitive tasks of making drinks and cleaning equipment felt different when he thought of them as temporary steps in a larger journey rather than permanent features of his daily routine. "You're in a good mood tonight," Jenna observed during a brief lull around 9 p.m. "Did you hear back from that business card guy?" "Not yet, but some other opportunities have come up. Good opportunities." "Like what?" Marcus told her about the Enro internship possibility, and Jenna's excitement was immediate and infectious. "Marcus, you're like becoming this success story right before my eyes. Poor student, works hard, gets amazing opportunities, probably ends up running his own renewable energy company someday." "It's just an application," Marcus said, but he couldn't help smiling at Jenna's enthusiasm. "I might not even get it." "You get it," Jenna said with absolute confidence. "You're one of those people who deserves good things, and the universe has a way of making sure people like you get what they deserve." Marcus wasn't sure he believed in cosmic justice, but Jenna's faith in his prospects was comforting. As the evening progressed, he found himself thinking about the strange confluence of opportunities that had emerged in the past few days. 3 years of steady, careful work, maintaining high grades, developing practical skills, building relationships with professors and classmates, seemed to be crystallizing into possibilities he'd never anticipated. When they closed the coffee shop at 11 p.m., Marcus walked home through his familiar neighborhood with a different sense of ownership and belonging. These streets had been his world for 22 years, the backdrop for his childhood and adolescence, and the struggle to build something better. But now they felt less like boundaries and more like foundations, solid ground from which to launch whatever came next. His apartment welcomed him with its familiar simplicity, but as Marcus settled down to continue working on his NREL application, he found himself imagining how the space might feel when he returned from a summer in Colorado, or how it might look to visitors from graduate school recruitment committees, or what he might tell Wellington about his living situation if their phone conversation led to a meeting. The application was coming together well. His research proposal built logically on his undergraduate work while addressing larger questions about renewable energy integration. His personal statement articulated his passion for sustainable technology and his commitment to developing solutions that could be implemented at scale. The writing felt authentic and compelling, expressing ideas and ambitions that Marcus was only now allowing himself to fully embrace. By the time he finished his work and prepared for bed, it was nearly 2 a.m., but Marcus felt energized rather than tired. The weekend stretched ahead with study sessions and homework and the usual domestic tasks, but underneath the familiar routine, he could feel the steady pulse of new possibilities taking shape. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus found himself thinking not about the limitations that had defined his thinking for so long, but about the expanding horizon of what might be possible. For the first time in his life, the future felt not like something that would happen to him, but like something he was actively creating through his choices and actions. Saturday morning arrived with the aggressive cheerfulness of sunlight streaming through Marcus's east-facing window, cutting through the lingering drowsiness of too little sleep and too much excitement. His usual running route took him through the awakening neighborhood, past the corner market where Mr. Patel was already arranging fresh produce, past the small park where early-rising mothers pushed toddlers on swings, past the community center where a pickup basketball game was forming despite the early hour. But this morning, Marcus's 5 miles felt different. His pace was faster, his breathing easier, and his mind was clear and focused in a way that suggested his body was responding to some internal shift he was still processing. The steady rhythm of his footsteps seemed to echo a new confidence, a sense that he was running not just for exercise, but towards something significant. When he returned to his apartment, sweaty and energized, he found an email waiting that made his heart skip. Research Assistantship Inquiry from Professor Chen. The message was brief but intriguing. "Marcus, could you stop by my office Monday morning before your first class? I have a proposition that might interest you." Marcus stared at the email for several minutes, trying to decode the implications. A proposition could mean anything. Additional research opportunities, teaching assistant positions, or perhaps something related to the graduate school materials Professor Chen had given him. The timing felt significant, coming just as he was preparing his NREL application and anticipating his phone call with Wellington. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Don't forget dinner tomorrow. Dad's making his famous barbacoa. Also, can you pick up milk on your way? We're out." The mundane normalcy of the message provided a welcome counterbalance to the professional uncertainties swirling through his mind. Whatever opportunities emerged from his various applications and conversations, Sunday dinner with his parents remained a constant, grounding him in relationships and traditions that had nothing to do with career advancement. Marcus spent the morning working on homework, finishing his thermodynamics problem sets and reviewing for Monday's exam. The material felt easier than usual, as if his expanded sense of possibilities had somehow enhanced his ability to process complex information. He found himself seeing connections between different concepts more clearly, understanding not just the mechanics of thermal systems, but their underlying principles and broader applications.
At noon, Jamie texted about the weekend study group. "Chen's place, 2 p.m. Alex is bringing pizza if you provide the whiteboard space." Marcus's apartment had become the default location for group study sessions, partly because of its proximity to campus, but mostly because Marcus had invested in a large whiteboard that covered most of one living room wall. The purchase had strained his budget when he'd made it 6 months earlier, but it had proven invaluable for working through complex engineering problems that required visual representation. The study group session that afternoon was particularly productive. They worked through a series of challenging thermodynamics problems, with Marcus facilitating the discussion and helping his friends see patterns in relationships that might not have been obvious on first glance. The collaborative problem-solving felt natural and energizing, reinforcing Marcus's growing sense that teaching and research might be ideal career directions. "You know," Chen said as they were finishing their last problem set, "you should seriously think about becoming a professor. You're better at explaining this stuff than most of our actual professors." "That's what everyone keeps telling me," Marcus replied, cleaning equations off the whiteboard. "Maybe everyone is right," Alex suggested. "Sometimes the things that come naturally to us are exactly the things we should be pursuing professionally." As his friends packed up their books and prepared to leave, Marcus found himself thinking about the weekend ahead. Tomorrow would bring Sunday dinner with his parents, a weekly tradition that provided both comfort and perspective.
He decided to tell them about some of the opportunities that were emerging, the NREL internship possibility, the graduate school options Professor Chen had mentioned, maybe even the business card from Wellington, though he still wasn't sure what to make of that encounter. That evening, Marcus returned to his NREL application, polishing his research proposal and fine-tuning his personal statement. The writing was coming together well, expressing his passion for renewable energy in terms that were both technically sophisticated and personally authentic. As he worked, Marcus found himself thinking about the summer ahead. Not just the possibility of working at one of the country's premier research institutions, but the broader question of how this opportunity might fit into his longer-term plans. His phone rang around 9 p.m., and Marcus was surprised to see Professor Martinez's name on the caller ID. "Marcus, I hope I'm not interrupting your evening." "Not at all, Professor. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to follow up on the NREL application we discussed. I just got off the phone with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who heads the Wind Energy Research Division there. She's very interested in your background and your senior thesis work." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. That's wonderful to hear. "There's more. Dr. Walsh mentioned that they're particularly looking for students who combine strong theoretical knowledge with practical, hands-on experience. When I described your approach to problem-solving and your background with mechanical systems, she asked if you might be available for a brief phone interview this coming week." "Absolutely," Marcus said without hesitation. "I'd be honored to speak with her." "Excellent. I'll send you her contact information, along with some background about the specific research projects they're working on. Marcus, I want you to know that this level of preliminary interest is unusual. They typically don't conduct interviews until after they've reviewed all applications, but your qualifications have caught their attention." After Professor Martinez hung up, Marcus sat in his quiet apartment trying to process this latest development. The NREL opportunity was becoming more real and more immediate than he'd expected, requiring him to think seriously about how it might fit with his other possibilities. The timing was both exciting and overwhelming. He'd spent years carefully managing modest expectations, and now multiple significant opportunities were emerging simultaneously. He decided to walk, despite the late hour. His neighborhood was quiet at 9:30 p.m., with most families settled in for the night, but Marcus needed the physical movement to organize his thoughts. As he walked the familiar streets, he found himself thinking about his grandfather's approach to opportunity and decision-making. Chen had always emphasized the importance of preparation meeting opportunity, but he'd also taught Marcus about the necessity of taking calculated risks when circumstances aligned properly. "Luck isn't random," his grandfather had often said. "Luck is when preparation meets opportunity and you're brave enough to act." Marcus realized that his current situation embodied exactly what his grandfather had been describing. Years of hard work, careful study, and skill development had prepared him for opportunities he hadn't even known to expect. Now those opportunities were presenting themselves, and the question was whether he had the courage to pursue them fully. By the time he returned to his apartment, Marcus had decided on his approach. He would pursue all the opportunities that were emerging: the NREL application, the graduate school possibilities, and the phone call with Wellington. Rather than trying to choose between different paths, he would gather information about all of them and make decisions based on complete understanding rather than premature assumptions. The weekend passed in a blur of studying, application work, and preparation for the week ahead. Sunday dinner with his parents provided the grounding and perspective Marcus needed, though he was surprised by their reactions to his news about emerging opportunities. "This is wonderful, mijo," his mother said, her eyes bright with pride and excitement. "We always knew you were destined for something special." His father was more analytical, asking detailed questions about the financial implications of different choices and the long-term career prospects associated with each path. But underneath his practical concerns, Marcus could see the same pride and excitement that his mother was expressing more openly. "Whatever you decide," his father said, as Marcus was preparing to leave, "we'll support you. Your mother and I have been saving a little each month just in case opportunities like this came up. We want you to be able to choose based on what's best for your future, not on what we can afford in the short term." The generosity and foresight of his parents' planning moved Marcus deeply. He'd been so focused on managing his own financial constraints that he hadn't fully appreciated the sacrifices his parents were making to expand his options. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of autumn in California, and Marcus found himself walking across campus with a sense of anticipation and purpose that felt entirely new. His first stop was Professor Chen's office, where he hoped to learn more about the proposition that had been mentioned in Friday's email. Professor Chen's office was a study in organized chaos. Books and papers stacked in precise piles, mathematical equations covering 2 whiteboards, and several half-finished cups of coffee that suggested the professor's work often extended well beyond normal business hours. "Marcus, thank you for coming by," Professor Chen said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I have something I'd like to discuss with you, and the timing feels fortuitous given some of the other opportunities I suspect you're considering." Marcus waited, uncertain what to expect. "I'm putting together a research team for a major project funded by the Department of Energy. 3-year grant focused on next-generation wind turbine design with emphasis on efficiency optimization and grid integration. The project needs a graduate student research assistant who can work at the intersection of theoretical analysis and practical application." Marcus felt his breath catch. "That sounds incredible, Professor." "The position comes with full funding, tuition waiver, health insurance, and a stipend that's quite generous by graduate student standards. But more importantly, it would give you the opportunity to work on cutting-edge research that could have significant real-world impact." Professor Chen pulled out a folder similar to the one he'd given Marcus the previous week, but thicker and more detailed. "The catch is that I need to submit the funding proposal with a named research assistant by the end of this month. If you're interested, we'd need to move quickly on your graduate school application."
Marcus accepted the folder, his mind racing to implications and possibilities. "Professor, this is an incredible opportunity, but I should mention that there are some other possibilities I'm exploring. The NREL internship, I'd imagine. Professor Martinez mentioned he'd recommended you." Professor Chen smiled. "Marcus, opportunities like these don't compete with each other. They complement each other. An NREL internship would actually strengthen your graduate school application and provide valuable experience for the research project I'm proposing." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Professor Chen outlining the research project in detail and explaining the application process for the graduate program. By the time Marcus left the office, he had a clear understanding of another possible path forward, one that combined his interest in research with the financial security of full funding and the intellectual challenge of working on problems at the forefront of renewable energy technology. His thermodynamics exam that morning went well. Better than well, actually. The concepts felt clear and interconnected in a way that allowed Marcus to not just solve the problems, but to understand their broader implications and applications. As he walked out of the exam room, Marcus realized that his expanding sense of possibilities was enhancing rather than distracting from his academic performance. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of classes, work, and preparation for the week ahead. Marcus confirmed his phone interview with Dr. Walsh at NREL for Wednesday afternoon, began organizing materials for his graduate school application, and found himself repeatedly glancing at Wellington's business card, which still sat on his desk like a small, elegant question mark. By Monday evening, Marcus had a clear sense of the week ahead. Wednesday's phone interview, Thursday's application deadlines, and Friday's phone call with Wellington. 3 conversations that could each potentially change the direction of his life, each representing a different vision of his future. For the first time in years, Marcus found himself not just managing the present, but actively creating the future, making choices that could shape the next decade of his life. Tuesday morning brought with it the kind of nervous energy that Marcus associated with the moments before important exams or job interviews. But this was different, deeper, and more sustained. He'd spent the previous evening preparing for his Wednesday phone interview with Dr. Walsh at NREL, reviewing recent research papers and organizing his thoughts about wind turbine efficiency optimization. But underneath the specific preparation was a growing awareness that his life was approaching a series of inflection points that would determine his trajectory for years to come. His morning routine provided familiar comfort. The 5-mile run through awakening neighborhoods, the simple breakfast, the walk across campus with textbooks that had become extensions of his thinking process. But even these familiar rhythms felt charged with anticipation, as if his daily habits were preparing him for something larger than academic routine. Professor Rodriguez's material science class focused on composite fiber reinforcement in aerospace applications, a topic that had direct relevance to wind turbine blade design. Marcus found himself taking notes with unusual intensity, seeing connections between the classroom material and the research project Professor Chen had described. The mathematics of stress distribution in composite materials wasn't just academic theory, it was practical knowledge that could improve the efficiency and durability of renewable energy systems. After class, Marcus stopped by the engineering library to research Dr. Walsh's recent publications. Her work on wind farm optimization was sophisticated and innovative, combining theoretical fluid dynamics with real-world field testing in ways that produced measurable improvements in energy generation. Reading her papers, Marcus felt both intimidated and inspired. Intimidated by the depth of her expertise, inspired by the practical applications of her research.
His shift at the math lab that afternoon was particularly demanding. Word continued to spread that Marcus was exceptionally good at explaining complex concepts, and students were beginning to schedule appointments specifically to work with him. He helped a graduate student with partial differential equations for her thesis research, worked with an undergraduate struggling with linear algebra applications, and spent an hour with a faculty member who was trying to understand a statistical analysis technique for his research. "You know," said Dr. Patterson, the faculty member, as they finished working through a complex regression analysis, "you have an unusual gift for making sophisticated mathematics accessible. Have you considered pursuing education as part of your career path?" The comment echoed similar observations Marcus had been hearing with increasing frequency. Teaching came naturally to him, but he'd always thought of it as a necessary skill for survival rather than a potential career direction. Now, with graduate school possibilities emerging and research opportunities taking shape, Marcus began to consider whether teaching might be an integral part of his professional future rather than just a temporary means of supporting himself. Wednesday morning arrived with the particular clarity that came from a good night's sleep and focused preparation. Marcus's phone interview with Dr. Walsh was scheduled for 2 p.m., giving him time to attend his morning classes and review his notes one final time. His advanced fluid mechanics class covered boundary layer theory and turbulent flows, material directly relevant to wind turbine aerodynamics, and Marcus found himself engaging with the concepts at a deeper level than usual, seeing immediate applications to the research he hoped to pursue. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus sat in his apartment with his notes organized on his desk, his laptop open to Dr. Walsh's research publications, and Wellington's business card visible at the edge of his peripheral vision. The juxtaposition of academic research and corporate opportunity seemed to encapsulate the choices he was facing, different paths toward the same ultimate goal of advancing renewable energy technology. His phone rang precisely at 2 p.m. "Marcus Chen, this is Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today." Dr. Walsh's voice carried the crisp professionalism of someone accustomed to evaluating technical competence quickly and accurately. Over the next 45 minutes, she asked detailed questions about Marcus's senior thesis research, his understanding of wind turbine aerodynamics, and his experience with both theoretical analysis and practical problem solving. "Professor Martinez tells me you have significant hands-on experience with mechanical systems. Can you give me an example of a time when practical experience helped to understand theoretical concepts more clearly?" Marcus found himself describing the encounter with Wellington's limousine, though he focused on the mechanical aspects rather than the personal implications. Working with that emergency repair helped me understand how theoretical knowledge about stress distribution and material properties translates into real-world problem-solving under pressure. Interesting, said Dr. Walsh, and Marcus could hear genuine curiosity in her voice. Our research here requires exactly that kind of integration between theory and practice. We're not just analyzing wind turbine performance in controlled conditions, we're solving real problems for real installations under real environmental constraints. The conversation continued with increasingly technical discussions about specific research projects NREL was pursuing. Dr. Walsh described a wind farm optimization study that would involve both computational modeling and field testing, exactly the kind of interdisciplinary work that matched Marcus's interests and abilities. "Marcus," said Dr. Walsh as the interview was concluding, "I'm impressed with your preparation for this conversation and your understanding of the research challenges we face. I'd like to invite you to visit our facility in Colorado for a more extensive interview process. We could arrange for you to meet with our research team, tour our testing facilities, and get a better sense of whether this opportunity aligns with your interests."
Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "I would be honored to visit, Dr. Walsh. When would be convenient? Could you manage a trip next week? We could cover your travel expenses, and you could stay in our visiting researcher housing. It would be a 2-day visit, interviews on Thursday, facility tours on Friday." After confirming the details and ending the call, Marcus sat in his quiet apartment, trying to process what had just occurred. The phone interview had evolved into an invitation for an in-person interview, suggesting that his application was being taken seriously by one of the country's premier renewable energy research institutions. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Kim. "How did your NREL interview go? Professor Martinez wants to know if we should start planning our summer research presentations." Marcus called Sarah back, and they spent 20 minutes discussing their respective interview experiences. Sarah had also received an invitation for an in-person interview, scheduled for the same week as Marcus's visit. The possibility that they might both be selected for summer positions added another layer of excitement and anticipation to an already charged situation. "This is really happening," Sarah said. "We might actually spend the summer working at one of the best renewable energy labs in the world." Thursday brought Marcus's thermodynamics exam results, an A+ with Professor Kim's handwritten note. "Excellent work, Marcus. Your understanding of practical applications is particularly sophisticated." The academic success felt different now that it was connected to larger possibilities, more like evidence of readiness for advanced challenges than simply the accumulation of good grades. That afternoon, Marcus completed his graduate school application for Professor Chen's research project, submitting materials that represented years of academic preparation and months of focused effort. The application felt comprehensive and compelling, expressing his passion for renewable energy research in terms that were both technically sophisticated and personally authentic. Friday morning arrived with the nervous anticipation Marcus associated with important phone calls and life-changing conversations. Wellington's business card had been sitting on his desk for nearly a week, a small rectangle of expensive paper that represented possibilities he still couldn't fully grasp. At exactly 10 a.m., Marcus dialed the number Wellington had provided. "Wellington Industries, Mr. Wellington's office, this is Patricia speaking." "This is Marcus Chen calling. Mr. Wellington asked me to call this morning." "Of course, Mr. Chen. Please hold while I connect you." The brief hold music was interrupted by Wellington's familiar voice, which sounded somehow different over the phone, warmer, more personal than Marcus remembered from their roadside encounter. "Marcus, thank you for calling. I hope you've had time to think about our conversation last week." "I have, sir. And I should mention that some interesting opportunities have emerged since we spoke." "Excellent," Wellington said, and he could hear genuine pleasure in his voice. "I'd hoped that our encounter might coincide with other positive developments in your life. Tell me about these opportunities." Marcus found himself describing the NREL internship possibility and the graduate school research project Professor Chen had proposed. Wellington listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated both technical understanding and genuine interest in Marcus's academic development. "Impressive," Wellington said when Marcus finished. "It sounds like you're approaching exactly the kind of career path I'd hoped to discuss with you." "Sir?" Marcus, what I'm about to propose may sound unusual, but I hope you'll hear me out completely before making any decisions.
Marcus felt his pulse quicken. I'm listening. Wellington Industries has been developing a new division focused on community-scale renewable energy systems. Installations designed for neighborhoods, small towns, and rural communities rather than massive utility-scale projects. It's technically challenging work that requires both sophisticated engineering and deep understanding of local needs and constraints. Wellington paused, allowing Marcus to absorb this information. We're looking for young engineers who can think beyond traditional approaches, who understand both the technical and social aspects of renewable energy implementation. Your background, academic excellence, combined with practical problem-solving skills and genuine understanding of community-level challenges, makes you exactly the kind of candidate we're seeking. Marcus was quiet for a moment, trying to process the implications of what Wellington was describing. "I'd like to offer you a position with our new division," Wellington continued. "Full-time employment after graduation, competitive salary, excellent benefits, and the opportunity to work on projects that could make renewable energy accessible to communities that have been underserved by existing approaches." The offer was both thrilling and overwhelming. Marcus had been preparing for entry-level positions with engineering firms, but Wellington was describing something more ambitious and impactful. "Sir, this sounds like an incredible opportunity, but I should mention that I'm also considering graduate school." "I was hoping you'd say that," Wellington replied. "Marcus, we're not just offering you a job, we're proposing a partnership. Wellington Industries has relationships with several universities for advanced research projects. We could structure your position to include graduate study, with the company supporting your education while you work on research that directly benefits our community-scale projects." Marcus felt his breath catch. Wellington was describing a path that would combine immediate professional opportunity with continued academic development, addressing both his financial constraints and his intellectual ambitions. "There's more," Wellington continued. "I'd like you to visit our headquarters in San Francisco next week, meet our team, see our current projects, get a better sense of whether this opportunity aligns with your interests and values. If you're available, we could arrange the visit for Monday and Tuesday. It won't conflict with your NREL interview later in the week." After confirming the details and ending the call, Marcus sat in his apartment, surrounded by the familiar objects of his current life, but feeling as if he was standing at the threshold of something entirely different. In the space of a single week, he'd gone from managing modest expectations to juggling multiple significant opportunities, each representing a different vision of his future. His phone rang again. This time, Professor Chen's name appeared on the caller ID. "Marcus, I have news about the research position we discussed. The Department of Energy approved our funding proposal this morning, and they specifically mentioned being impressed with the graduate student researcher we'd identified for the project." Marcus felt a surge of excitement mixed with growing complexity. "That's wonderful news, Professor." "There's more. The funding includes provisions for industry collaboration, and I've been thinking about your situation. If you're interested in pursuing both graduate study and industry experience, we might be able to structure something that accommodates both goals." The convergence of opportunities was becoming almost surreal. Marcus found himself describing Wellington's offer to Professor Chen, who listened with the analytical attention of someone processing multiple variables simultaneously. "This is fascinating," Professor Chen said when Marcus finished. "Wellington Industries has an excellent reputation for innovation, and their community-scale focus aligns perfectly with the practical applications we want to pursue in our research. Marcus, what you're describing could be the foundation for a truly unique career path." Over the weekend, Marcus found himself in constant motion, researching Wellington Industries' recent projects, preparing for his visit to San Francisco, reviewing materials for his NREL trip, and trying to process the implications of choices that would have seemed impossible just 2 weeks earlier. His apartment felt smaller somehow, not because of physical constraints, but because his vision for the future had expanded beyond what the space could contain. Sunday dinner with his parents provided both celebration and perspective. When Marcus described the opportunities that were emerging, his mother's eyes filled with tears of pride and joy, while his father asked practical questions about timing, financial implications, and long-term career prospects. "Mijo," his mother said, reaching across the dinner table to squeeze his hand, "your grandfather would be so proud of you. All those hours he spent teaching you about fixing things, about helping people. It's all leading to this." His father was more analytical, but equally supportive. "The important thing is that you're not just choosing between different jobs. You're choosing between different ways of making a difference in the world. That's the real measure of success." Monday morning found Marcus on a plane to San Francisco, watching the California landscape unfold below him with a sense of anticipation that felt both thrilling and slightly unreal. Wellington Industries' headquarters occupied several floors of a gleaming tower in the financial district, with views that stretched across the bay to the hills of Marin County. But what impressed Marcus most wasn't the prestigious location. It was the atmosphere of focused energy and innovative thinking that pervaded the offices. Wellington himself greeted Marcus in the lobby, dressed casually in khakis and a polo shirt that suggested the company culture valued substance over appearances. "Welcome to Wellington Industries, Marcus. I'm glad you could make the trip." The tour that followed was revelatory. Rather than the corporate environment Marcus had expected, Wellington Industries felt more like an advanced research laboratory combined with a startup's entrepreneurial energy. Engineers worked in open spaces filled with prototypes and testing equipment, collaborating on projects that ranged from micro-wind turbines for urban environments to solar systems designed for rural communities without existing electrical infrastructure. "Our philosophy is simple," Wellington explained as they walked through the research and development area. "Renewable energy technology is only as good as its accessibility. We're not interested in building the most sophisticated systems in the world if they're only available to wealthy communities or large corporations." Marcus met with several team members throughout the day, each conversation revealing new aspects of the company's mission and culture. Dr. Sarah Chen, another coincidence of names that made Marcus smile, led the community integration team, focusing on how renewable energy systems could be designed to meet specific local needs and constraints. Her work involved extensive field research, spending time in communities to understand their energy challenges and develop customized solutions. "What we've learned," Dr. Chen explained, "is that technical excellence isn't enough. The best renewable energy system in the world is useless if it doesn't fit the economic, social, and cultural context where it's being implemented." The most compelling conversation came with Maria Rodriguez, a recent MIT graduate who was leading a project to develop affordable solar systems for low-income housing developments. Her work combines sophisticated engineering with deep understanding of economic constraints and social equity issues. "This is exactly the kind of work I dreamed about doing when I was studying engineering. We're not just solving technical problems, we're addressing real challenges that affect real people's lives." By the end of Monday's meetings, Marcus had a clear understanding of Wellington Industries' culture and mission. This wasn't just a corporation pursuing renewable energy for profit. It was a group of passionate individuals committed to making a real difference through their work. An organization committed to democratizing access to clean energy technology through innovative engineering and community-focused implementation. Tuesday brought more detailed discussions about the specific position Wellington was offering. The role would involve rotating through different project teams, gaining experience with various renewable energy technologies while contributing to the development of community-scale systems. The company would support Marcus's graduate education through a partnership with UC Berkeley, allowing him to pursue advanced research while gaining practical industry experience. "What we're proposing," Wellington explained during their final meeting, "is a 5-year development program that would give you experience across all aspects of renewable energy implementation, technical design, community engagement, project management, and policy development. By the end of the program, you'd be qualified to lead major initiatives or pursue advanced research, depending on your interests." The financial package was generous, significantly more than Marcus had expected for an entry-level position, with full support for graduate study and opportunities for rapid advancement based on performance. But what impressed Marcus most was the alignment between the company's mission and his own values and aspirations. "Mr. Wellington," Marcus said as they concluded their meetings, "I need to be honest with you. This opportunity is exactly what I've been hoping for, but I also have commitments to explore other possibilities." "The NREL interviews and the graduate research position Professor Chen described?" Marcus nodded, surprised that Wellington was so well informed about his other opportunities. "Marcus, I want you to pursue every opportunity that interests you. What we're proposing isn't going anywhere, and honestly, the experience you'd gain from an NREL internship would make you even more valuable to our team. Take the time you need to make the right decision." The flight back to San Luis Obispo gave Marcus time to process the visit and its implications. Wellington Industries had exceeded his expectations in every way. The work was meaningful, the culture was supportive, and the opportunities for growth and impact were substantial. But the visit had also clarified the importance of exploring all his options thoroughly before making commitments. Wednesday morning brought Marcus back to his familiar campus routines, but everything felt different now. His classes, his work shifts, even his study group sessions felt like preparation for larger challenges rather than ends in themselves. The problems they worked through in thermodynamics and fluid mechanics had immediate relevance to the renewable energy projects he'd seen at Wellington Industries. The students he tutored in the math lab were learning skills they'd need for engineering careers that could make real differences in the world. That afternoon, Marcus received a call from Dr. Walsh confirming the details for his NREL visit. "We're very much looking forward to meeting you in person. Your phone interview impressed our entire research team, and we're excited to discuss how you might contribute to our wind energy optimization projects." Thursday brought Marcus's final classes before spring break and his trip to Colorado. Professor Martinez pulled him aside after their environmental engineering seminar to express his enthusiasm about Marcus's opportunities and his confidence in Marcus's ability to succeed in any path he chose. "What's happening to you right now is what we hope for all our best students. You've prepared yourself well, you've demonstrated both technical competence and personal integrity, and now opportunities are emerging that match your abilities and values." Friday morning found Marcus on another plane, this time bound for Denver and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. The facility sprawled across a mesa southwest of the city, with research buildings and testing installations scattered among the scrub oak and prairie grass. But what struck Marcus immediately was the sense of purpose that pervaded the entire complex. This was a place where some of the world's most important energy research was being conducted.
Dr. Walsh met Marcus at the visitor center, and her enthusiasm for the work was immediately apparent. "Welcome to NREL, Marcus. I think you're going to find our wind energy research fascinating." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of meetings, facility tours, and technical discussions. Marcus met with researchers working on advanced blade designs, toured the wind turbine testing facilities, and participated in discussions about grid integration challenges that were at the forefront of renewable energy development. The most compelling session was a research seminar where graduate student interns presented their summer projects from the previous year. The work was sophisticated and impactful, real research that was advancing the field and influencing industry practices. Marcus could easily envision himself contributing to similar projects, applying his academic knowledge to solve practical challenges in renewable energy implementation. "What questions do you have about the internship program?" Dr. Walsh asked during their final meeting Friday afternoon. "Honestly, Dr. Walsh, I'm impressed by everything I've seen here. The research is exactly what I've been hoping to pursue, and the opportunity to work with your team would be invaluable." "Good, because we'd like to offer you a position for this summer. 10 weeks, full stipend, working on wind farm optimization with specific focus on turbine efficiency analysis. The project would build directly on your senior thesis work while exposing you to challenges and methodologies you wouldn't encounter in an academic setting." The offer was exactly what Marcus had hoped for, but it also added another layer of complexity to decisions that were becoming increasingly difficult. He now had 3 significant opportunities: Wellington Industries' 5-year development program, Professor Chen's graduate research position, and NREL's summer internship, each representing a different approach to pursuing his passion for renewable energy. On the flight back to California, Marcus found himself thinking about his grandfather's workshop and the patient way Chen had approached complex mechanical problems. The secret, his grandfather had often said, isn't forcing a solution. It's understanding all the pieces and letting them find their natural relationships. Marcus realized that his current situation embodied exactly what his grandfather had been describing. He had multiple opportunities, each valuable in its own right, and the challenge wasn't choosing between them, but understanding how they might work together to create something larger than any individual option. Sunday dinner with his parents provided the grounding and perspective Marcus needed to think clearly about his choices. When he described his visits to Wellington Industries and NREL, both his parents listened with the careful attention of people who understood that their son was navigating decisions that would shape his entire future. "What does your heart tell you?" his mother asked quietly. "That I want to do work that makes a real difference. All of these opportunities could lead to that, but in different ways." His father was more practical. The question isn't which opportunity is best in abstract terms. The question is which path gives you the best combination of learning, impact, and future possibilities. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment with information packets and business cards spread across his desk, representing the various paths his life could take. For the first time since the opportunities had begun emerging, he felt clarity about his priorities and his decision-making process. He wanted to pursue renewable energy work that combined technical excellence with community impact. He wanted to continue learning and growing, whether through graduate study, industry experience, or research opportunities. And he wanted to maintain the values and integrity that had brought him to this point, regardless of which specific path he chose. Marcus picked up his phone and began making calls, not to accept or decline specific offers, but to explore how the opportunities might complement each other in ways that would maximize his ability to learn, contribute, and make a difference. The first call was to Professor Chen, exploring whether the graduate research position could accommodate industry collaboration or summer internship experiences. The second was to Dr. Walsh, discussing whether the NREL internship could lead to ongoing research relationships that might complement graduate study. The third was to Wellington Industries, asking about the flexibility of their timeline and their willingness to work with someone who was pursuing multiple development opportunities. By the end of the evening, Marcus had begun to envision a path that combined elements from all three opportunities, starting with the NREL summer internship to gain research experience, beginning graduate study in the fall with Professor Chen's fully funded research project, and developing a relationship with Wellington Industries that could lead to collaboration or employment opportunities after completing his advanced degree. It was an ambitious plan that would require careful coordination and considerable effort, but it aligned with his values and aspirations in ways that felt both challenging and authentic. For the first time since the opportunities had begun emerging, Marcus felt not overwhelmed by choices, but energized by possibilities. The phone calls Marcus made that Sunday evening set in motion a series of conversations and negotiations that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Professor Chen was not only supportive of Marcus combining the NREL internship with graduate study, but genuinely excited about the research possibilities such an arrangement could create. "Marcus, what you're proposing is exactly the kind of integrated approach that produces the most innovative research," Professor Chen said during their Monday morning meeting. "Real-world experience at NREL would inform your graduate research in ways that purely academic study never could." Dr. Walsh's response was equally encouraging. When Marcus called to explain his interest in pursuing both the summer internship and graduate study, she immediately saw the potential for ongoing collaboration. "We have several graduate research partnerships. Students who do summer internships here often continue working with us on thesis projects during the academic year. Your proposed research with Professor Chen would complement our wind farm optimization work perfectly." The conversation with Wellington Industries proved most complex,
but ultimately most rewarding. When Marcus spoke with Wellington directly to explain his desire to pursue immediate research opportunities while building toward longer-term collaboration, Wellington's response surprised him. "Marcus, what you're describing demonstrates exactly the kind of strategic thinking we value. Building expertise through diverse experiences before committing to specific career paths shows maturity and wisdom." Wellington went on to propose a flexible arrangement that would allow Marcus to pursue his summer internship and graduate study while maintaining a consulting relationship with Wellington Industries. "We're in no hurry. We'd rather wait for the right person who brings the right combination of experience and perspective." By the end of March, Marcus had formalized arrangements that seemed almost too good to be true. He would spend the summer at NREL working on wind turbine efficiency optimization, begin graduate study in the fall with Professor Chen's fully funded research project, and maintain a part-time consulting relationship with Wellington Industries that would provide both additional income and practical industry experience. The NREL internship began in early June, and Marcus found himself living in temporary housing on the Colorado Mesa, surrounded by researchers from universities across the country. The work was demanding and exhilarating, 10-hour days analyzing wind turbine performance data, developing computational models, and testing new approaches to blade design optimization. His project focused on improving turbine efficiency in variable wind conditions, a challenge that required both sophisticated mathematical modeling and practical understanding of aerodynamics and material science. Working with Dr. Walsh's team, Marcus developed new algorithms for real-time turbine adjustment that increased energy capture by 12% under specific environmental conditions. "This is the kind of innovation that can have immediate real-world impact," Dr. Walsh told Marcus during their midsummer evaluation. "Your ability to see connections between theoretical principles and practical applications is remarkable."
The NREL experience also provided Marcus with perspective on the broader renewable energy field. He attended seminars by leading researchers, participated in interdisciplinary collaborations, and gained understanding of how academic research translated into industry applications. The work environment combined the intellectual rigor of university research with the practical focus of industry development. Most importantly, the summer internship confirmed Marcus's passion for renewable energy research and his ability to contribute meaningfully to the field. The projects he worked on weren't just academic exercises. They were addressing real challenges that affected energy production and environmental impact. When Marcus saw data showing that his turbine optimization algorithms could increase annual energy production by significant amounts, he felt the deep satisfaction of work that mattered. Sarah Kim, who had also been selected for an NREL internship, worked on complementary solar energy research in a different division. They met regularly to discuss their projects and found that their research was increasingly interconnected, addressing different aspects of renewable energy integration and optimization. "This is what I imagined graduate research would be like," Sarah told Marcus during one of their weekly coffee meetings. "Real problems, sophisticated tools, and the sense that what we're doing could actually make a difference." The summer also provided Marcus with clarity about his academic and career goals. Graduate study was definitely the right next step, but he now understood how research could be structured to address practical challenges while advancing theoretical knowledge. The consulting relationship with Wellington Industries gave him insight into how innovative research could be implemented at community scale, while the NREL experience showed him how national laboratories approached large-scale energy challenges. In August, Marcus returned to San Luis Obispo to complete his final undergraduate semester and begin graduate coursework with Professor Chen. His senior thesis, informed by his NREL research, earned recognition as one of the year's outstanding undergraduate projects. More importantly, it provided the foundation for his graduate research proposal, which Professor Chen described as graduate-level work that addresses questions at the forefront of the field. The transition to graduate school felt natural and exciting. Marcus's coursework was challenging but manageable, building on knowledge and skills he'd developed through his undergraduate studies and summer research. His research project,
focused on community-scale wind energy systems, combined theoretical analysis with practical field testing in ways that aligned perfectly with his interests and abilities. The consulting work with Wellington Industries added another dimension to Marcus's development. Working part-time on real industry projects while pursuing academic research gave him perspective on how different approaches to renewable energy development could complement each other. Wellington's community-focused mission resonated with Marcus's values, while the company's technical sophistication challenged him to apply his academic knowledge to complex real-world problems. By his second semester of graduate study, Marcus was conducting research that was drawing attention from both academic and industry colleagues. His work on wind turbine optimization for variable environmental conditions built directly on his NREL internship while addressing questions that had immediate relevance for Wellington Industries' community-scale projects. "What you're doing," Professor Chen told Marcus during one of their weekly research meetings, "is exactly what graduate research should be. Advancing theoretical knowledge while addressing practical challenges that matter to society." Marcus's graduate research culminated in a thesis that made significant contributions to wind energy optimization theory while demonstrating practical applications through field testing with Wellington Industries' community installations. The work earned recognition at national conferences and resulted in 3 peer-reviewed publications in leading renewable energy journals.
More importantly, the research established Marcus as an emerging expert in community-scale renewable energy systems, a specialization that positioned him perfectly for the next phase of his career. Wellington Industries offered him a full-time position leading their new community development division, with responsibility for managing projects that could bring affordable, renewable energy to underserved communities across the country. The position came with a generous salary, excellent benefits, and opportunities for rapid advancement. But what attracted Marcus most was the mission. Wellington Industries was committed to democratizing access to renewable energy, making clean power available to communities that had been excluded from earlier waves of renewable energy development. "This is the work I've been preparing for my entire academic career," Marcus told his parents during Sunday dinner the week he received Wellington's offer. "Technical challenges that matter, opportunities to make a real difference, and the chance to honor everything grandfather taught me about helping people solve problems." His parents' pride was evident, but Marcus could see they also understood the broader implications of his success. Their son's achievements reflected not just individual accomplishment, but the validation of values and sacrifices that had shaped their family for generations. Marcus accepted Wellington's offer and began his professional career in September, 2 years after the roadside encounter that had initiated this remarkable sequence of opportunities. His first assignment was leading a team developing renewable energy systems for rural communities in Central California, areas that had been economically disadvantaged but possessed excellent solar and wind resources. The work required everything Marcus had learned through his academic studies, research experiences, and industry collaborations. Technical design had to be balanced with economic constraints, community needs had to be understood and addressed, and solutions had to be both sophisticated and accessible. It was exactly the kind of challenge Marcus had been preparing for throughout his educational journey. 6 months into his professional career, Marcus received a call from Dr. Walsh inviting him to speak at a national renewable energy conference about his community-scale optimization research. The invitation was both an honor and a responsibility, an opportunity to share knowledge that could influence how the field approached renewable energy implementation in underserved communities. "Your work bridges the gap between research and application in ways that are having real impact," Dr. Walsh told Marcus. "The algorithms you developed during your NREL internship are being implemented by wind farm operators across the country, and your community integration research is influencing policy discussions at the federal level." The conference presentation went well, drawing an audience of researchers, industry professionals, and policymakers who were interested in Marcus's integrated approach to renewable energy development. Several universities invited him to speak about his career path and research practice, while multiple companies expressed interest in collaborating on community-scale projects. But the most meaningful response came from a high school student who approached Marcus after his presentation. The young woman, whose name was Elena Rodriguez, explained that she was from a rural community that had recently received renewable energy installations based on Marcus's research. "Before your systems were installed, my family was spending almost a third of our income on electricity. Now we're energy independent, and my parents are using the money they save to help me apply to engineering programs. I want to do the work you do, help communities like mine have access to clean energy." The conversation with Elena crystallized for Marcus the real impact of his work. The technical achievements were satisfying, the career opportunities were exciting, but the ultimate measure of success was the difference his research and development efforts made in people's lives. A year later, Marcus was promoted to Director of Community Development at Wellington Industries, with responsibility for managing renewable energy projects in rural and underserved communities across the western United States. The position required him to integrate technical expertise with project management skills, community engagement capabilities, and policy analysis, exactly the kind of multidisciplinary challenge he had been preparing for throughout his academic and professional development.
The work was demanding but deeply fulfilling. Marcus's team developed innovative renewable energy systems that were both technically sophisticated and economically accessible, bringing clean power to communities that had previously been excluded from renewable energy development. Each project required careful analysis of local conditions, community needs, and economic constraints, but the results were consistently positive: reduced energy costs, increased energy independence, and environmental benefits that enhanced quality of life. Marcus also maintained his research connections, collaborating with Professor Chen on ongoing projects and consulting with NREL on policy analysis and technology development. The combination of industry experience and academic research kept him at the forefront of renewable energy innovation, while ensuring that his work remained grounded in practical applications. 2 years after joining Wellington Industries, Marcus was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee about renewable energy policy and community development. His testimony, based on extensive field experience and rigorous research, influenced legislation that provided federal support for community-scale renewable energy projects. The key insight, Marcus told the subcommittee, is that renewable energy technology is only as valuable as its accessibility. We have the technical capability to provide clean, affordable energy to every community in America. What we need now is policy support that makes such technology economically viable for communities that have been historically underserved. The testimony led to additional opportunities for Marcus to influence policy discussions and industry standards. He was appointed to advisory committees for both the Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency, providing technical expertise for policy decisions that affected renewable energy development across the country. But despite his growing professional recognition and expanding opportunities, Marcus remained grounded in the values and relationships that had shaped his development. Sunday dinners with his parents continued to provide perspective and grounding, while his friendship with Sarah Kim, who had also built a successful career in renewable energy research, reminded him of the collaborative relationships that made innovative work possible. "Remember when we were undergraduates worrying about whether we'd find jobs after graduation?" Sarah said during one of their periodic catch-up calls. "Now you're influencing national energy policy, and I'm running a research lab. Sometimes life exceeds your wildest expectations." Marcus reflected on Sarah's observation and realized that his current success would have been unimaginable to his undergraduate self. The apartment where he'd lived as a graduate student had been replaced by a comfortable house in Palo Alto, close to Wellington Industries headquarters, but also convenient for his ongoing collaborations with Stanford researchers. The house had a workshop in the garage, equipped with tools that would have made his grandfather proud. both traditional mechanical implements and sophisticated electronic instruments for renewable energy system analysis. Marcus often worked in the garage workshop in the evenings, maintaining the hands-on approach to problem-solving that his grandfather had taught him. The space provided both practical utility and emotional connection to the values that had guided his development. The importance of understanding how things worked, the satisfaction of fixing what was broken, and the responsibility to help others solve problems. 3 years after graduating, Marcus established the Chen Foundation for Community Energy Development, named in honor of his grandfather and dedicated to providing renewable energy access to underserved communities. The foundation combined Marcus's technical expertise with Wellington Industries' resources and his academic connections to develop innovative approaches to community-scale renewable energy implementation.
Average of 60%, while providing environmental benefits and economic development opportunities. "This is what I hoped for when I first met you on that highway," Wellington told Marcus during the Foundation's first annual board meeting. Technical excellence applied to social challenges, creating solutions that benefit both individual communities and society as a whole. The Foundation's work attracted national attention and provided a model for similar initiatives in other regions. Marcus was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and policy forums about the Foundation's approach to community energy development. Each presentation was an opportunity to share knowledge and inspire others to pursue similar work. But the most meaningful recognition came from the communities themselves. Marcus received dozens of letters from families whose lives had been improved by renewable energy installations, students who'd been inspired to pursue engineering careers, and community leaders who'd used energy cost savings to fund local development projects. "Your work gave us our future back," wrote Maria Santos, a community organizer from a rural town where the Foundation had installed one of its first solar systems. "Our children can afford to go to college now. Our small businesses can compete effectively, and our community has hope again." 3 years after establishing the Chen Foundation, Marcus found himself standing in the same spot on Highway 101 where he had first encountered Wellington's disabled limousine. The desert landscape was unchanged, the same scrub brush, the same distant mountains, the same shimmering heat that rose from the asphalt in undulating waves. But everything else about his circumstances had transformed beyond recognition. Marcus was no longer a struggling undergraduate walking home from campus. He was driving a Tesla Model S, not from ostentation, but because Wellington Industries encouraged employees to use the clean technology they were helping to develop. The car was loaded with equipment for a site visit to a community renewable energy installation, one of dozens of projects the Foundation had completed across the American Southwest. The irony of returning to this place wasn't lost on him. That afternoon 3 years ago, he'd stopped to help a stranger with a flat tire, motivated by nothing more than his grandfather's teachings about helping others. Now he led an organization that was systematically addressing energy challenges for entire communities, work that had grown directly from the relationships and opportunities that encounter had initiated. His phone rang as he stood in the desert silence, the same stretch of highway where everything had begun. The caller ID showed Elena Rodriguez's name, the high school student who had approached him after his first conference presentation, inspired by the renewable energy systems her community had received. "Marcus, I have news I wanted to share with you personally." "What's happening, Elena?" "I just got accepted to Stanford's engineering program with a full scholarship. And Marcus, they specifically mentioned being impressed by my essay about wanting to pursue community energy development because of the difference your foundation's work made in my hometown." Marcus felt a familiar surge of satisfaction that came not from personal achievement, but from seeing how his work had created opportunities for others. Elena represented exactly what he hoped the foundation's impact would be. Not just improved energy access for current communities, but inspiration and opportunity for the next generation of engineers and community leaders. "That's incredible news, Elena. Stanford's program is excellent, and I know you'll do amazing work there."
There's more. Professor Chen, the same Professor Chen you worked with, will be my faculty advisor. When he learned about my background and my interest in community energy development, he said that he'd been hoping to find a student with exactly my perspective and motivation.
The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Elena describing her plans for undergraduate research and her long-term goals for addressing energy equity issues. By the time they finished talking, Marcus was smiling with the particular joy that came from seeing his work create ripple effects that extended far beyond his direct involvement. As he drove toward his destination, a small town that would receive solar installations within the next month, Marcus reflected on the pattern of unexpected connections and expanding opportunities that had characterized the past 3 years. Elena's acceptance to Stanford was just the latest example of how the Foundation's work was creating pathways for others to pursue similar missions. The town he was visiting, Esperanza, had a population of 2,800 people and an economy based primarily on agriculture and small-scale manufacturing. Energy costs had been a persistent challenge, consuming up to 40% of household incomes and limiting opportunities for economic development. The Foundation's installation would provide solar power for the entire community, reducing energy costs by an average of 70% while creating local employment opportunities for system maintenance and expansion. Marcus had learned that successful community energy development required more than technical excellence. It required understanding local economics, building relationships with community leaders, training local residents for ongoing system maintenance, and ensuring that projects enhanced rather than disrupted existing social and economic networks. The Esperanza project exemplified this integrated approach. Working with community leaders, the Foundation had designed a solar installation that would be owned and operated cooperatively by residents, with profits from excess energy sales supporting local schools and infrastructure improvements. The project included training programs that would prepare 12 local residents for careers in renewable energy system installation and maintenance. This isn't just about providing clean energy, Marcus explained to the gathered community members during the project kickoff meeting. It's about creating economic opportunities and building local capacity for managing your own energy future. The meeting took place in the community center, a modest building that served multiple functions for local organizations and events. As Marcus looked around the room at the faces of people whose lives would be directly affected by the Foundation's work, he thought about his grandfather's workshop and the patient way Chen had approached every repair project, with respect for the people who would use the results, attention to details that might not be immediately obvious, and commitment to solutions that would last. After the meeting, Marcus was approached by Roberto Vega, a local high school teacher who had been instrumental in organizing community support for the solar project. "My students have been following your Foundation's work," Roberto said. "Several of them are interested in engineering careers, but they've never had access to the kind of opportunities that prepare students for competitive university programs." The conversation led to an impromptu discussion about educational partnerships and outreach programs. Within an hour, Marcus and Roberto had outlined a collaboration that would bring Foundation engineers to Esperanza's high school for regular workshops on renewable energy technology, while providing summer internship opportunities for interested students. Education and energy access are interconnected challenges, Marcus realized aloud. Communities that lack affordable energy also often lack educational opportunities, and addressing one problem can help solve the other. This insight had been emerging gradually through the Foundation's work across dozens of communities. Energy cost reductions freed up family resources that could be invested in education, while local renewable energy installations created technical training opportunities that prepared residents for emerging career fields. 6 months later, Marcus returned to Esperanza for the dedication ceremony of their completed solar installation.
The transformation was visible not just in the gleaming panels that covered rooftops throughout the town, but in the energy and optimism that characterized community conversations about the future.
Our electricity bills have dropped by 80%, Mayor Patricia Gonzalez told the assembled crowd during the dedication ceremony. But more than that, we have a sense of control over our energy future that we've never had before. 3 of Roberto's students had been accepted to competitive engineering programs at major universities, while 12 local residents had completed training programs that qualified them for renewable energy jobs with companies throughout the region. The cooperative ownership structure meant that profits from excess energy sales were already funding improvements to the local school and community center. The success in Esperanza was being replicated across the Foundation's growing network of community installations. Each project was customized to local conditions and needs, but all shared common elements: technical excellence, community ownership, local job creation, and educational opportunities that prepared residents for participation in the emerging renewable energy economy. A year later, Marcus was invited to speak at the United Nations Climate Conference about community-scale renewable energy development as a strategy for addressing both environmental challenges and economic inequality. His presentation drew on examples from the Foundation's work to demonstrate how innovative approaches to technology deployment could create solutions that benefited multiple stakeholders simultaneously. The key insight, Marcus told the international audience, is that environmental sustainability and economic justice are not competing priorities. They are complementary objectives that can be advanced through thoughtful technology deployment and community engagement. The presentation led to invitations for the Foundation to expand its work internationally, partnering with organizations in developing countries to adapt community-scale renewable energy approaches to different cultural and economic contexts. Within 2 years, Foundation-supported projects were operating in 12 countries across 4 continents, each tailored to local conditions while sharing core principles of community ownership and local capacity building. But even as the Foundation's work gained international recognition, Marcus remained grounded in the relationships and values that had shaped his development. Sunday dinners with his parents continued to provide perspective and grounding, while his friendship with Sarah Kim, now a professor at Caltech, reminded him of the importance of maintaining connections to academic research and theoretical development. "Sometimes I can't believe how far we've come," Sarah said during one of their periodic dinners together. "Remember when we were undergraduates worrying about finding entry-level jobs? Now you're influencing international energy policy, and I'm training the next generation of renewable energy researchers." Marcus nodded, but his mind was also on the students they were working with. Elena Rodriguez, now a sophomore at Stanford, conducting undergraduate research on community energy systems. The 12 high school students from Esperanza who were participating in the Foundation's summer internship program. The dozens of young engineers who had joined Wellington Industries and the Foundation's team, attracted by the opportunity to do work that combined technical challenges with social impact. "The most rewarding part," Marcus replied, "is seeing how our work creates opportunities for others to pursue similar missions. Every project we complete, every student we mentor, every community we serve creates ripple effects that extend far beyond what we could accomplish individually." 5 years after the roadside encounter that had initiated his remarkable journey, Marcus was invited to deliver the commencement address at his alma mater, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Standing at the podium in the same auditorium where he had attended lectures as an undergraduate, Marcus looked out at graduating seniors whose circumstances and aspirations reminded him of his younger self. "5 years ago, I was sitting where you are now, wondering whether my engineering degree would lead to meaningful work, worrying about student loans and job prospects, hoping that the technical knowledge I had acquired could somehow be translated into solutions for problems that mattered." He went on to describe his career journey, the unexpected encounter with Wellington,
the opportunities that had emerged through academic excellence and community engagement, the Foundation's work addressing energy challenges in underserved communities, and the expanding network of collaborations that were creating solutions at local, national, and international scales. But the most important lesson I've learned, Marcus concluded, is that meaningful work emerges from the intersection of technical competence, social awareness, and moral commitment. Your engineering knowledge is a tool. How you choose to use that tool will determine not just your career success, but the impact you have on communities and lives around you. Use it wisely, use it compassionately, and never forget that the greatest innovations come from understanding both technical possibilities and human needs. The audience erupted in sustained applause, and Marcus could see in their faces the same mixture of hope and determination he had felt years ago on a desert highway. We hope you enjoyed this inspiring story of Marcus's journey from struggling student to renewable energy leader. Stories like this take considerable time and effort to research and craft. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with anyone who might benefit from Marcus's example of how helping others can transform your own life.